Well, welcome back to Prof E Plays. I'm Prof E, and we are going to be picking up here with playing some more Cepheus Universal. We're looking at the story of Jeannie Alexander, I believe is her last name. Something like that. Yes, Jeannie Alexander and her friends, who I have lovingly dubbed the trio, who have been investigating a an assassination plot they kind of stumbled upon, right? So just to kind of get people caught up as to where we are. In the past, they stumbled upon this plot. They wanted to find out more details about it here on the planet. So they did some like casing of City Hall where they found out that this was supposed to happen. They know that it's going to be happening on Friday night. We are currently no Friday noon. It is currently Wednesday morning, according to my notes. All right, so we don't have very long, about 2 days until this is all supposed to happen. The person that is going to be assassinated is the head of the Servants of Des, which is a charitable organization here on the planet. And it is one of the organized crime syndicates that is going to be taking the leader out. Right. Uh, so what happened last time, right, was our people were going to be trying to research a little bit more about the person who's actually been tasked with carrying out this plot. Instead, what happened was they got a knock on the door of their hotel room and ended up encountering an officer with the last name of Waters, right, who uh, apparently was reporting, oh, it's Chong Waters, that was his name, uh, who was reporting that apparently they had been noticed when they were casing City Hall, and now the Peacekeepers, who is effectively a mercenary group in charge of law enforcement here on this planet, um, basically wants them to come down to the station and say what they've been doing, what's been going on, why they are doing the things they're doing. And so that is where we are at this point. All right. So let's go ahead and get going then. We'll pick up where we left off. They are on the way. So the way what we're using here is the gemulator right there, right? Which the structure here is first you would say what your expected scene is, right? And then you roll to find out whether that expected scene is what actually happens. Right. So our expected scene is that we will see make sure that I got this right. Yes, they're going to negotiate with the Peacekeepers about our relative roles between the faction and between our trio. For various reasons, our trio didn't particularly trust the Peacekeepers would actually take this threat seriously, which is why they didn't go to them in the first place. They had to have some reason. So they don't really think they would take it seriously, was really the concern there. All right, so the way that this works then, so that is our expected scene. This next thing would be to determine what our scene transition is. So the scene transition, we roll a D100 here, and I have a scene transition table. Now, I do apply a modifier here based on how the previous scene went. The previous scene, we actually failed at our goal to research Marisol Maze. Um, so therefore, when I roll, I'm going to add a plus 10 right to this. The scene transition. Okay, so the scene transition, it says a 30. 30 plus 10 is 40. So 40, it says, is a positive replacement. So positive replacement is where we take some element of the scene and replace it with something that is going to be beneficial, right, to our characters. And so here are the elements of the scene we typically would look at, right? So the actual scenes would be expected, so we have location, goal, and then like the characters involved are typically the elements we talk about. Let me just double check that to make sure that I'm. Yeah, so when it says here for replacement, completely, no, oh, completely replace the expected scene. Oh, because it's not an alteration, it's a replacement. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, so the example here was if you're supposed to meet the friend in the tavern and meet a friend in the tavern, transition, if a negative replacement would be that you find their corpse outside of the tavern is the example. Okay, but we need something more positive. Okay, so something positive for us as we're on the way there. Okay, so we also would roll on another table on the focus. So this one is without a modifier, so let's just go ahead and roll that. Okay, so it looks like you got a 37 there. So 37 would be adventure goal, right? So the positive replacement should be something related to the adventure goal. The adventure goal is to prevent this assassination. So, hmm. Ah, so we totally replace it. What is happening here that is going to be different? Hmm. I'm not feeling anything specific coming to mind. So I'm going to roll for some inspiration, see if we can come up with something here. So I'm going to use the main oracle from the gemulator. 74 is correctly allow 60 correctly allow blackmail. Oh, correctly allow blackmail. Okay, well that's an interesting scene. Um, hmm, right. Uh, there may have been a little continuity break in there, but that's okay. So what I've decided here, right? So correctly allow blackmail. Uh, that's an interesting thing. So I think what we're going to try to do, we're going to try to convince Officer Waters to just let us handle it. Now we tried to do that back at the hotel, but we're not very successful with that. But I mean, I think before I'd been making the assumption that we just kind of figured that ship had sailed. Well, I don't think that's true. I think the positive replacement here is that we get another chance, right, to try to convince Officer Waters that really it makes more sense, right, for them to let us handle this, especially because one of the things that we established about the setting is that um, City Hall is kind of infamous, right, for people getting killed there, right? So I mean, it makes some degree of sense for them to act like they had no idea this was coming, right? Perhaps, because apparently they're not particularly good at preventing such things from happening. And so even though we might make the argument, and did make the argument before, that it's, of course, obviously this is their job to do, nonetheless, maybe they might just be corrupt enough, right, that they don't necessarily have to act like they know something. Right, so I think that that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to convince Officer Waters of this. So I need to check to see who has the uh, possibility of making this case. So it's definitely not Jeannie. Jeannie does not have very high skills in terms of persuasion and the like. Lionel, similarly, oh, none of them do. Oh, they're all terrible. When it comes to something like persuasion, okay, carousing is probably as good as we're gonna get, right? So I'm gonna accept that for Lionel's part. Lionel does have the carousing skill at level 1. That's better than going this unskilled. So we're just gonna make the roll and see whether he hits it. So remember, there's a skill test, so we're aiming for 8 for a success here, and he gets 1 added to this. Well, that's not a success. It's 4 plus 1 is a 5, which is 3 short of the 8 we would need. So definitely a failure. Definitely a failure. We're trying to make this case to Officer Waters, and we are not at all successful in convincing him that we are actually going to. He actually should um, trust us with this. All right. Well, I mean, I think that in my mind, that kind of would end that particular scene. As we're just traveling, we're trying to make this case. I'm not really going to try to flesh out the details here too much. Um, and we're making the same kind of case we would make anyway. He did seem more receptive than we might have otherwise expected. So I'm just going to go ahead and chalk that up as a failure. Right? We did not, in fact, convince Officer Waters just to let us handle it and to let us go. Right? So we do, in fact, our next expected scene would be again trying to negotiate right with the peacekeepers about our roles. That's my expectation. This time, because that was so short, normally I only do like one scene in a video. I think I'm gonna do two because that was extremely short. So let's go ahead and try here. And again, we roll for scene transition, and I just lost my die. I'm gonna pause. All right, we're back. Okay. So again, rolling for transition, and we got a 67. That's at a plus 10 as well. Would make it a 77. Okay, this is a negative alteration. Okay. So negative alteration. An alteration is not a replacement, so most of the scene elements are going to be the same, but there is going to be something that is different that is working against us in some fashion. So what is that difference? 22. All right, so 22, according to this, is a new character. Okay, so that is going to be the alteration. There's going to be a different character we have to deal with here. So in terms of location, we are at the Peacekeeper headquarters, and I think our goal is to actually convince them to let us, in effect, take the lead, right? So they might provide some support, but we're going to take the lead. So that's our goal. So convince peacekeepers who let the trio take the lead. Now we have a new character though involved here, and this is note it's a negative alteration. So this is somebody that probably is going to not be too keen on working with us and on doing this. The most obvious thing is this is going to be like whoever it is that is Officer Waters' superior, right? So I don't know if it's necessarily like it's not necessarily the head of the whole organization for the planet, but it's certainly somebody a step up. So let's go ahead and see if we can find out more about this particular person. All right, so for that, I'm going to roll on some oracles from the Gemulator. All right, so what do we know about this person? So I think it makes sense to me. Um, so we have an idea what their role would be. That's obvious enough. But I want to find out. First, I'm going to need a name. So I'm just going to go to a random name generator. So random name generator. There we are. Random name generator. Go ahead and give me, say, 10 names.
How do you make
Okay.
an Airbnb
Well,
a
Lily
Verbo?
Norton is at the top
Picture
of
a
the list,
vacation
so
setting.
sure, that's
Now,
it.
imagine that
All
every
right,
time you
so
stay there,
Lily
you get
Norton
rewards towards
is
your
like
next trip.
the lieutenant or
Congrats!
something
Now
like
you're in a
that.
Verbo.
Yeah, say
Make it a
lieutenant.
Verbo.
Right,
Light
Lily
flights now
Norton
available for cash and can only be used on Expedia, Hotels.com, and Verbo.
is the one we talked
How
about.
do you make an
All right, so I need to
Airbnb a
find out a little bit
Verbo?
more about her.
Picture a
So I'm going to roll
vacation
for
rental with a host
disposition.
who's showing you
On this,
every
I'm actually going to
room
roll
like you've never seen a
twice
house
and take
before.
the
Now get
less
Verbo.
favorable. That's how I
There you
think
go.
that this
No
negative
host stay
alteration is
over.
going to have an
Now
effect on
it's
us.
a Verbo.
All right,
Make it a
so
Verbo.
5 is disinterested. 8, right, is unfriendly. So I think she's unfriendly toward us. So she has an unfriendly disposition. In terms, I want to find out more about her. So how about her morale? How's her
How do you make
morale
an
to?
Airbnb a Verbo?
And
Picture a
so
vacation
0
rental.
here
Now
indicates
imagine that every time
fanatical.
you stay there,
Okay.
you earn rewards
Let's, what
towards your
about her
next trip.
reputation?
Congrats! Now you're in a Verbo. Make it a Verbo.
4
Light
is
flights now available for cash and
disloyal
can
in
only be
her
used on Expedia,
experience level.
Hotels.com, and Verbo. How do you make an
5
Airbnb
is
a
novice.
Verbo?
Okay, so
Picture
what
a
I'm
vacation rental with a host who's
imagining
showing you
here, right? So she's
every
fanatical,
room like you've
but
never
has a
seen a house before.
reputation for
Now
being
get Verbo.
disloyal,
There you
and
go.
is a
No host
novice.
stay
So I think
over.
that, and she's
Now it's
obviously
a
not a
Verbo.
novice
Make it a
to
Verbo.
the peacekeepers, otherwise she wouldn't be in any kind of supervisory position. But I think it might make sense that she's relatively new to that role. And I think maybe the way that she got that role was she like threw somebody else under the bus who was perhaps competing for that position. So that's what I'm thinking,
Some people
right?
like to keep their
So
head safe
so a
at
lot of the
night with
people
confidence by
on
checking
the
with
force don't
Verbo.
necessarily like her, and that is something we might be
Check
able
it
to
out there
use
first
to our advantage.
before meeting your
So
business family.
I want to keep that in mind.
So
All
check this out
right.
first for a quote make an Airbnb a verbo? Picture a vacation rental with a host who's showing you every
For some reason, in
room
the
like you've
background it
never seen
says
a house before.
desktop
No, get rid
audio
of them.
on.
There you go.
What that is, I'm gonna turn that off, I guess. All right, so let's see what's going on then here with our uh, new friend or unfriend, right? Lily Norton. Okay, so I'm imagining here, right, that we get taken into like her office. Probably not like Probably not like a big office. She's not the chief, right? She just kind of has her own little space, right? That Officer Water takes us into, right? Kind of explains the situation. Now, I don't think it's going to be like the full explanation, obviously, but right, more or less explains kind of who we are, what we're doing, what we are claiming at this point. So I think that Officer Waters is probably going to share whatever information we have already shared with him, right? Right. So I don't think that we need to go through all that again and all of that conversation. Now, unlike Officer Waters, who was a bit more unusually tolerant, we'll just put it that way, of the approach that we took. Not so right with Lieutenant Norton. Lieutenant Norton is not particularly happy with what we have been doing, right? Is actually quite unhappy with what we have been doing. So we're not in a very good position here in terms of trying to negotiate, right? So on the other hand, it's also not clear to her that we have actually really broken any laws. So the idea that she can just arrest us and put us in jail or whatever, that's not gonna. She can't quite do that, is what I'm imagining, right? So she's trying to figure out how to negotiate this whole process as well. Right? She's new to this position, right? And this is kind of weird, right? Dealing with vigilantes, which some of us have pretty good training as far as that goes, right? So I think that that's kind of where she is right now. Now, we also know that she has a fanatical, how was it? It's not disposition, fanatical what was the term again? Fanatical level of morale. Okay. Oh, okay. Right. So the idea that she might just be kind of worn down is certainly not true. Okay, so that's not going to be particularly relevant for our case right here. Okay, so I'm trying to imagine what this conversation is looking like. Right. So I think that it's pretty obvious, right, that it, I'm trying to think of how this can go any way other than her just saying, okay, I have the information. If you think of anything else, just let me know, and just dismissing us entirely. Right. So I think it's pretty obvious we're going to have to try and speak up, right, on our own behalf. And again, I think that's going to fall on Lionel being the one that has the better social type skills. Right. He also happens to have leadership skills as far as that goes. So even though kind of in my brain, Jeannie is the one that was the leader, probably because she's the first I made out of three. But no, I don't think that's true. I think it's actually Lionel, despite his younger age, uh, being the one that is really kind of taking the lead here. Right. So I think he's going to again use that carousing skill as best he can, right, to try to convince Lily Norton of this. So I'm wondering, this might be the kind of thing where, okay, so I get plus one naturally. I think that maybe there is the option to take your time. So if we are willing to spend some time here, right, then I think that we can perhaps, we can imagine this as rather than us trying to get in and get out, we're trying to really draw this conversation out in order to make our point, which means I'm going to make this roll, and then I'm going to roll a d6 and say that's the number of hours that it took, right, for us to have this meeting, whatever the outcome is going to be. And I think that's going to allow me then to roll this to plus two rather than just a plus one. So let's go ahead and do that. So rolling at a plus two. Good. Good. So that's seven plus two gives us a nine, right, which is a success with an effect of one. That the effect of one doesn't really mean very much, but let's go ahead and roll to see how long it took us. Oh dear. Well, we are there into the middle of the afternoon, right? Really trying very hard. Right? So I imagine that it probably takes like an hour or so to get there. So we got there around nine. Took us 6 hours, so it's now 3 p.m. on Wednesday. We have finished our conversation here. So what I'm imagining here is the way this conversation went. And we know that it was successful. Right? Is that Lionel just kind of made the case that here we have a small group that the he's going to claim. Now we know this is not strictly true, but he's claiming, right, that the Sons of Oksana, which is the organization that is planning this assassination, they're not as aware of this small group that is unaffiliated with anybody. They are certainly much more aware of the Peacekeepers and what they're doing. So this is a chance for them to basically act like undercover agents. So all we really need is a little bit of support potentially, and that is going to be the most effective way for us to handle this. And we're not going to. Uh, it doesn't make sense, right, for peacekeepers who are already very busy, right, for them to take this whole thing over. No, we don't need to do that. Just let three of us handle leadership of it, and maybe if we can provide an officer too, that would be good. And I think that Lieutenant Lily Norton starts out very doubtful of this. I mean, after all, unfriendly demeanor, she is not convinced. She's also not real comfortable in her position quite yet, but I imagine is covering this up with kind of a brave face, is what I'm imagining here. Right. But I think that Lino does manage to more or less just wear her down over the course of this 6 hours that they are talking and negotiating about what is going to happen. So I think that that is what's going to happen there. So in terms of what kind of benefit they're going to provide to us, I'm actually going to use the Peacekeepers faction sheet, and I'm going to roll on their resources to find out what kind of resources they can put forward. Because we know that they are tax funded, so they do have quite a few resources available to them, right? If this is something they actually want to devote those resources to. So I'm going to roll here. It's at a +3. Right. Okay. So the answer is not much. So 3 + 3 is a 6. A 6 would not be a success typically here. Although this is a characteristic roll, so I guess it's technically a success, but not by much. So I'm imagining here we'll have just like a couple officers, maybe, right, that are going to be devoted to this. So I think I'll go ahead and say that, right, that we have two officers. Right. So while she was unfriendly, she does at least agree to provide, say, two officers. Nobody like super like highly trained or specialized or anything like that. These are really just kind of support, right? So to support trio. So I think we managed to turn that one around pretty well as far as that went. So well done, Lionel, on getting that done. Right, so I'm imagining now what our next scene is going to be. I don't think I'm going to play out the scene right now here in this episode, but I think it is good for me to have some sense of what my next step is. So at this point, we're at mid-afternoon on Wednesday. We have less than 2 days, right, until the assassination is supposed to occur. So what are we going to be doing at this point? I mean, okay, one, because we have some, and the peacekeepers are not going to be getting in our way. That gives us a more freedom to actually do the planning part. Now, we wanted before to try to learn more about the assassin herself, right? I, I'm not sure whether that's going to make a whole lot of sense. I think it might make more sense, right, for us to engage in some more of the kind of logistical planning of things. I think that makes more sense to me. Okay. Um, at the same time, we do still have, well, at least this afternoon, this evening, and all day the next day, do what we can. Yeah, I think that maybe we need to. So the next expected scene is going to be making plans specifically, right, with the officers that are assigned to us. So I'm going to say, so the next expected scene is making plans with, right, the peacekeepers officers. It's going to be back in a hotel. So that is what the next expected scene is going to be. And oh, I'm going to put a check mark here because I think we actually did manage. right, to convince the Peacekeepers to let the trio take the lead on this one. Well done. Um, and then we'll play it out and see what happens with the planning. But that is next time. So, as Prof E, signing off.